But joining us now on the Newsmaker line is New York divorce attorney Jacqueline Newman. There's a very interesting article back in December, towards the end of the year, talking about a new law in New York, and you've got about a little over 3 hours to file. If your spouse is the breadwinner, whether it's your wife or your husband, if they're the breadwinner and they make a lot of money, you may be in for a huge loss filing your divorce papers after today. Please welcome Jacqueline Newman. Jacqueline, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
You know, for a Friday, Jacqueline, I hate to say it, I tend to be upbeat. I like to be upbeat. I like to give my audience some hope and a positive note to look forward to for the weekend. Divorce is a tough one. You know, it's a tough note to finish with. But give us the background of this new law that's going to be in effect in New York.
So basically, what's happening is that if you go all the way back, prior to 2010, when New York became a no-fault state, there was no formula whatsoever when it came to spousal support, maintenance, alimony. It's all the same thing. So what used to happen is that divorce attorneys would have to figure out somebody's budget, and then you'd figure out how much you could afford to pay someone. And it was very, very speculative. People would fight about whether you needed to spend money on organic milk or not, and everybody would battle, and there would be tons of legal fees that were usually more money than what it was worth, the amount that you were fighting about. So then in 2010, when no-fault came into place, one of the things they did was they put a formula in place for interim maintenance. Interim maintenance meaning from the time you start a divorce action up until the time that there's actually divorce. There was still no formula for what happened after the divorce. So post-divorce, people were still fighting. But due to the interim formula, sometimes people, you would use that formula, and then sometimes you would agree that that would just be what would happen going forward. So now, as of the end of the day today, starting on Monday, all cases that are started after Monday will be a new formula, and the new formula actually addresses interim maintenance as well as post-divorce maintenance, which is a really big shift from what's happened before. And a lot of people are upset about it. Some people are happy, some people are upset, because one of the things that's changing from that interim maintenance formula is they used to consider combined income of the parties up to $543,000. So just for an example, if you had somebody who wasn't working, if you had one spouse that wasn't working and one spouse that was earning in excess of $543,000, that spouse who wasn't working would get spousal support, assuming that nothing else was going on, may get spousal support of basically what in essence was $13,575. Now we're in a situation where under these new statutes, they're bringing that 543 down to 175.
That's such a huge. I mean, how do they come up with these numbers, Jacqueline? I mean, I'm willing to be reasonable. Okay, maybe it should come down, maybe it should go up. I'm not too sure because I'm not a big divorce person. So, but how do you go from 543 down to 100 plus something?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I understand from just speaking to people who are involved with some of these rules is that with the 543, I mean, it was very high. And what would happen is, you would have somebody who, if you were living in New York City and you had somebody who was making, say, $800,000, by the time they paid spousal support and child support in private school, they ended up really having very little money. And it's kind of crazy when you walk into court and say, I make $800,000, but I end up, at the end of the day, having like $2,000 to live on. And that's really what was happening. So I think the 543, for purposes of this, was too high. Now, 175, in my opinion, is incredibly low, and how they ended up coming down to it, the theory, as was explained to me, had something to do with they wanted to make it easier for people that were of lower income to have quick and easy formulas. Personally, I don't really see the connection on that because if you lowered or upped the cap, it wouldn't really matter. But as I understand, that was some of the compromises that were made.
Jacqueline Newman, having gone to law school, I'm an attorney myself. I mean, I'll admit that domestic relations was one of my favorite classes because, it was like a story, that you're, reading a story. Although I'll tell you, I often got depressed on mankind. I'm thinking, it's these. I don't know how you do it. I remember as part of law school, I spent a summer in a divorce family court, and I lasted a week, and that was it was only for a week, but I'm thinking to myself, if I had to spend another day in divorce court, I think I don't know what I'd do. I'd lose it. I don't know how you do it. I mean, what do you recommend? It would seem to me, and we have a divorce court show on the weekends on our program, and I'll listen in because it's kind of interesting, interpersonal relationships. But it seems to me that you really should get one of those prenuptials. I know it sounds sad, but what do you think? Where are we going on this?
Where with prenuptials? I mean,
what would you recommend? What do you recommend to friends that are getting married? I'm telling you, you're just setting yourself up. If the average still is 50%, and I don't know if it's probably fluctuated by now, and 50% of all first marriages fail. So if that's the case, I don't know if it still is, but that's that's always what they say. I mean, that's 50-50. That's not good odds that you're gonna have a healthy, loving relationship with a couple of kids. It's just not good odds. 50-50. I don't know if especially the cost. If you end up getting in a divorce and you happen to have children, it's like a life of misery, Jacqueline. I don't know. It really. I hate to say it, but
I mean, we do. I mean, my practice does do a lot of prenups. And, they're always kind of a double-edged sword because on some level people will say you're planning your divorce. And then other people will take a more practical approach, such as you're saying, and saying, look, it's a 50-50 shot. But I will tell you a story that I tell people about prenups, and I think it's something that you should just kind of think about when you're thinking about them, in that I once had a client that had a very, very difficult prenup negotiation. I mean, the husband was very, very wealthy. She really didn't have a lot. They were screaming. They were crying. I actually, a few times, didn't even know if they were going to get married. They finally finished the prenup. She comes into my office afterwards and says, the tears practically wet in her eyes still, says, I'm really glad we went through this process. And I looked at her and I said, I'm very surprised to hear you say that after what just went on. And she said, you know why? She said, because I know that we now learned how to have difficult conversations. I believe our marriage will be stronger because we went through this and now realize what's important to us, what's not important. We talked about sensitive issues. Money is very sensitive to a lot of people and what it represents to them. And I have to say, while I definitely thought they were going to be touch and go for a while, after hearing that from her, I believe these people are going to be married for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I like that. I like that advice. And in fact, if I remember correctly reading somewhere, I don't know how true it is, but most divorces or the overwhelming majority of divorces, or strike that, the biggest arguments in marriage is over money. I remember hearing that or something. So it really all kind of makes sense. And if you're able to get it out of the way, then so be it. That's some good advice, Jacqueline. I like that. Well, anyway, Jacqueline, it was a pleasure having you on the program. If divorce comes up in the news again, maybe between the Clintons, perhaps, I'll love to have you on again.
I would love to come on.
All right. Take care, Jacqueline. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Jacqueline Newman, divorce attorney in New York. You've got another 3 hours to submit your papers and file. Otherwise, best of luck to you. Anyway, let's go.